The Benatar drifted silently through the vast emptiness of space, its systems barely holding together. Inside, Tony Stark sat slumped against a bulkhead, weak and pale. The holographic interface of his Iron Man suit flickered as he recorded what he believed to be his final message. "This is it, Pep," he said softly, his voice cracking. "We gave it a hell of a run. I'm sorry I won't be there to see it through, but if anyone can move forward, it's you." Behind him, Nebula sat cross-legged, her cybernetic hands methodically repairing one of the ship's consoles. Her cold, pragmatic demeanor masked the faint glimmer of concern in her eyes as she glanced at Tony. She had come to respect his resilience, even if she didn't fully understand his constant optimism. Tony's eyelids fluttered, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm him. Just as he began to drift into unconsciousness, a blinding white light engulfed the ship. The console Nebula was working on sparked violently, and the entire Benatar shuddered. "Tony!" Nebula barked, shaking him awake. He groggily sat up, squinting at the light pouring through the viewport. A massive shadow loomed outside, a star destroyer, its triangular shape blotting out the stars. "What is that?" Tony murmured, his breath catching. The sight of such an enormous craft, dwarfing anything he'd seen before, filled him with both awe and dread. A deep hum resonated through the ship as a tractor beam latched onto the Benatar, pulling it toward the Star Destroyer's docking bay. Nebula instinctively reached for her weapon, but Tony grabbed her arm. "Hold on. We don't know what they want yet," he said, his voice shaky but measured. "They want to kill us," she replied bluntly. The ship jolted as it settled inside the Star Destroyer. The docking bay was bustling with stormtroopers and officers, their stark white armor and gray uniforms creating an eerie sense of order. A squad of stormtroopers marched up the boarding ramp, weapons raised. "Step out of the ship, now!" barked the lead stormtrooper, his blaster trained on the doorway. Tony raised his hands as he stumbled down the ramp, Nebula following reluctantly. All right, no need to get trigger happy," Tony said, his usual sarcasm laced with exhaustion. "We're unarmed." The stormtroopers surrounded them, guiding them through the vast sterile corridors of the Star Destroyer. The two were brought before the ship's captain, a stern man with a crisp uniform and a face devoid of warmth. "You're not from any system we recognize," the captain said, his eyes narrowing as he studied them. "State your names and purpose." Tony hesitated, trying to assess the situation. Tony Stark, genius, billionaire, playboy. Well, I was anyway. She's Nebula. We're, refugees. Ship broke down, you know how it is. The captain's expression remained unmoved. "Your vessel sent out a distress signal. We answered. Consider yourselves lucky." Nebula scoffed. "Lucky? You've got us in cuffs." Tony cut her off. "Look, we're grateful, but let me save you the trouble. Our galaxy has bigger problems. A madman named Thanos wiped out half of all life. I don't know if it's reached you yet, but trust me, he's coming." The captain frowned, clearly confused. "Thanos? Half of all life? We've received no such reports." Tony shook his head, frustrated. "You're telling me you haven't noticed half your people turning to dust?" "Enough," the captain snapped. "Take them to holding until we decide what to do with them." Tony and Nebula were escorted to a holding cell, its stark walls and dim lighting oppressive. Nebula sat silently in the corner, her arms crossed as she glared at Tony. "This is a mistake," she said. "These people are not allies." "We don't have a lot of options," Tony replied, examining the cell's technology. "Besides, look around. Their tech is off the charts. If we can figure out how to use it, we might stand a chance against Thanos." Nebula shook her head. They're not interested in helping, they're interested in control. Ignoring her, Tony began scavenging parts from the cell's fixtures, cobbling together a small device. His ingenuity caught the attention of a passing stormtrooper, who reported his actions to the ship's higher-ups. Word quickly reached Darth Vader. Darth Vader stood in his private chambers, shrouded in darkness. The stormtrooper knelt before him, recounting the prisoner's actions. This Tony Stark appears to have advanced engineering skills, my lord. He's already modified parts of his cell's systems. Vader's mechanical breathing filled the room as he considered this information. Bring him to me, he commanded, his voice cold and commanding. I wish to see this an engineer for myself. Back in the cell, Tony had just completed a crude but functional scanner when stormtroopers arrived to escort him. Nebula tensed, ready to fight, but Tony placed a hand on her arm. Stay put, I'll see what they want. As he was led through the labyrinthine corridors of the Star Destroyer, Tony couldn't help but marvel at the scale and sophistication of the Empire's technology. Whoever designed this place didn't skimp on the budget, he muttered. Finally, he was brought before Vader, who loomed in the center of the room, like a specter of death. Tony, ever the showman, quipped, "Let me guess, Darth Vader. Love the whole ominous black armor vibe. Very intimidating." Vader stepped forward, his breathing steady. "Your skills have piqued my interest. Tell me, Stark, what is it you seek?" Tony's demeanor grew serious. A way to stop Thanos, and maybe a way home. Vader tilted his head, his expression unreadable beneath his mask. "Perhaps we can help each other." Tony Stark stood in Vader's chambers, his eyes darting between the towering Sith Lord and the intricate consoles lining the walls. The low hum of the machinery and Vader's mechanical breathing created an oppressive atmosphere. Tony, as usual, masked his unease with sarcasm. "So, you're telling me you're the boss around here?" he asked, "because the helmet really sells it." Vader stepped closer, his cape brushing the floor. "Your humor does not concern me, Stark. Your skill does." Tony raised an eyebrow. "And what's in it for me?" Vader gestured to the consoles. "The Empire possesses resources and technology far beyond anything in your galaxy. Aid us, and we will grant you the means to defeat this Thanos." Tony hesitated. "And what's the catch?" "There's always a catch with guys like you." Vader's voice grew colder. "The catch is that you do not have a choice." Tony chuckled nervously. "Fair point." Tony was given limited freedom to work within the Star Destroyer's engineering bay, guarded closely by stormtroopers. There, he began to study the Empire's technology, marveling at its complexity while also noting its inefficiencies. "Whoever designed this needs a lesson in streamlining," Tony muttered, dismantling a faulty droid. "But hey, not bad for fascists." Vader occasionally observed Tony's work from the shadows, his silent presence unnerving the genius inventor. Over time, Tony started to modify the Star Destroyer's systems, increasing its efficiency and creating new prototypes for advanced droids and weapons. Nebula, however, watched all of this with growing concern. "You're getting too comfortable," she warned. "They're not your allies." "They're a means to an end," Tony replied. "If I can use their tech to stop Thanos, then it's worth it." Nebula narrowed her eyes. "And if they decide you're not useful anymore?" Tony didn't answer. During one of their meetings, Vader asked Tony a simple question. "What do you see when you look at me?" Tony, initially hesitant, decided to speak bluntly. "A man trapped in a walking iron lung. No offense, but whoever built your suit wasn't thinking about long-term efficiency." Vader tilted his head, intrigued. "And you believe you can improve it?" Tony nodded. "With the right resources, yeah. I can make you faster, stronger, more efficient. You won't even need that fish tank anymore." Vader regarded Tony for a long moment. "Do it." Tony was granted access to Vader's private quarters, including the Bacta tank where the Sith Lord spent much of his time. The sight of Vader's scarred, fragile body unsettled Tony, but he quickly buried his feelings under a mask of professionalism. Over weeks, Tony designed and built a new suit for Vader. The upgraded armor was sleek, durable, and enhanced with advanced life support systems. For the first time in years, Vader could move with agility and fight without relying on the Bacta tank. When Vader tested the suit, his power was undeniable. He crushed training droids with ease, his movements fluid and precise. "Impressive," he admitted, his voice colder than ever. "You've exceeded my expectations." Vader reported Tony's success to Emperor Palpatine, who summoned the inventor to his throne room aboard the Star Destroyer. Tony, escorted by stormtroopers, entered the dimly lit chamber, where Palpatine sat cloaked in shadow. "Ah, the genius from another galaxy," Palpatine said, his voice oily and deceptively friendly. "Your reputation precedes you." Tony, feeling uneasy, forced a smirk. "Thanks, but I'm guessing you didn't call me here for an autograph." Palpatine leaned forwards, his yellow eyes gleaming. "I've heard much about your encounter with Thanos. Tell me everything." Reluctantly, Tony recounted the events of Titan, describing the Mad Titan's power, his mission to collect the Infinity Stones, and the devastating snap that erased half of all life. Palpatine listened intently, his expression unreadable. "And you believe the Empire can stop him?" Palpatine asked. "With the right tech, absolutely," Tony replied. "But I need your resources." Palpatine smiled faintly. "Then we shall provide them, but first, we require something from you." Palpatine revealed plans for a new Death Star, larger and more devastating than the original. He tasked Tony with using his knowledge to improve its design, promising that its power would be used to destroy Thanos. Tony, desperate and blinded by his goal, agreed. Over the following weeks, he worked tirelessly on the project, creating advanced weapon systems and incorporating his nanotech into the station's defenses. Stormtroopers and officers marveled at his ingenuity, and even Vader began to show a begrudging respect. Nebula, however, became increasingly alarmed. "You're building them a weapon of mass destruction," she said. "This isn't about stopping Thanos anymore. You're helping them conquer." Tony brushed her off. "It's a means to an end. Once Thanos is gone, I'll figure something out." Nebula's frustration boiled over. "They're using you, Stark. Palpatine isn't your ally. He's a manipulative tyrant." Tony's jaw tightened. "And what's your solution? Sit around and hope for the best? I'm doing what I have to do." Nebula's warnings fell on deaf ears, and tensions between her and Tony reached a breaking point. She secretly began gathering evidence of Palpatine's true intentions, determined to stop Tony before he went too far. Meanwhile, Palpatine grew more insidious, planting seeds of doubt in Tony's mind. "You are a remarkable individual, Stark," he said during one of their meetings. "But greatness often comes with sacrifice. Are you prepared to do what is necessary?" Tony, weary and conflicted, nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes to stop Thanos." Palpatine's smile was cold and calculating. "Good. Together we shall bring order to the galaxy." Tony unveils the completed designs for the new Death Star, unaware of the Empire's true intentions. Nebula, now determined to stop him, begins planning her next move. The construction of the new Death Star proceeded with terrifying speed, its colossal structure coming together above a desolate, resource-rich planet under Imperial control. Tony Stark's design streamlined the process, incorporating nanotech into the construction, making the station more powerful and efficient than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Tony's innovations didn't stop at the Death Star. He enhanced Stormtrooper armor with nanotech, making them faster, stronger, and more resilient. Each Stormtrooper was now equipped with adaptive tech that could heal minor injuries, deploy energy shields, and sync with the Empire's vast communication networks. Vader, clad in his newly upgraded suit, became an even more fearsome figure. His enhanced armor allowed for precise fluid movements, and his connection to the Force seemed amplified. Palpatine watched these developments with cold satisfaction, his plans unfolding exactly as he had envisioned. Nebula, however, was not impressed. She had grown increasingly distant from Tony, her warnings falling on deaf ears. She saw the Empire for what it truly was, a machine of oppression and destruction. Unable to sway Tony, she began working in secret, determined to expose Palpatine's true intentions. Tony's belief in the Empire's ability to stop Thanos deepened as he worked closely with its resources. The engineers and officers marveled at his ingenuity, and even Vader began to treat him with a measure of respect. "You've built an army," Vader remarked one day, watching as stormtroopers tested their new armor in simulated combat. "And yet, you have not considered its true purpose." Tony, distracted by his work, replied, "The purpose is simple: to stop Thanos. That's all that matters." Vader said nothing, but his silence was heavy with implication. Meanwhile, Tony's relationship with Palpatine grew more insidious. The Emperor, ever the manipulator, began to plant doubts in Tony's mind. "You have accomplished much," he said during one of their meetings, "but I sense hesitation in you. Is it Nebula? Her loyalty wavers." Tony, torn between his desperation to stop Thanos and his lingering doubts about the Empire, dismissed the notion. "She'll come around." Palpatine smiled faintly. "Be wary, Stark. Even the closest allies can betray you." Unable to stand by any longer, Nebula broke into Palpatine's throne room during one of Tony's meetings. She confronted him, her voice trembling with anger. "Tony, you've been blind to what they're doing. Palpatine doesn't care about stopping Thanos. He's using you to build a weapon to control the galaxy." Tony hesitated, his gaze flickering between Nebula and Palpatine. "Nebula, I'm doing this for all of us, for our universe." "For your ego," she snapped. "Look around, Tony. You've built an empire of death." Palpatine rose from his throne, his voice calm but dripping with menace. "Such insolence, Stark. She is a threat to our alliance. Eliminate her." Tony's eyes widened. "What? No. She doesn't understand." "Then make her understand," Palpatine replied coldly. "Her defiance jeopardizes everything we've built. Prove your loyalty." The room grew tense as Nebula drew her weapon, ready to defend herself. "You're really going to do this?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Tony activated his nanotech suit, his expression pained. "Don't make me do this, Nebula." The fight was brutal and emotional. Nebula's combat skills, honed through years of survival, clashed with Tony's advanced technology. She used her agility and resourcefulness to evade his attacks, but Tony's suit gave him the upper hand. "Tony, they're playing you," Nebula shouted, dodging a repulsor blast. "You're better than this." "I'm trying to save everyone," Tony yelled back, his voice breaking. "Why can't you see that?" The fight ended with Nebula's defeat. Tony stood over her, his suit battered, his chest heaving. Palpatine approached, his yellow eyes gleaming with triumph. "You've done well, Stark. She was a distraction. Now focus on what truly matters." Tony stared at Nebula's lifeless body, the weight of his actions beginning to sink in. But instead of acknowledging his guilt, he buried it, convincing himself that he had no other choice. With Nebula gone, Tony poured himself into his work, perfecting the Death Star and its fleet of Star Destroyers. The Empire now possessed multiple Death Stars, each one equipped with devastating weapons that could annihilate entire systems. Using the Empire's advanced tracking systems, Tony located faint energy signatures matching those of the Infinity Stones. He informed Palpatine, who ordered Vader to prepare for an assault. The Empire's fleet descended upon a desolate planet, where Thanos had been living in isolation. Tony, Vader, and Palpatine led the assault, storming Thanos' farm with legions of stormtroopers. Thanos, weakened and disillusioned after destroying the Infinity Stones, put up a fierce fight, wielding his immense strength and cunning. But against the combined forces of Tony's technology, Vader's power, and Palpatine's dark side mastery, even the Mad Titan could not prevail. As Thanos lay dying, he spoke his final words to Tony. "You think you've won, but you're just like me, sacrificed everything for nothing." Tony stood over him, his expression unreadable. "At least I tried." With Thanos defeated, Palpatine turned his attention to Tony. "The stones," he demanded. "Where are they?" Tony explained that Thanos had destroyed the stones. Palpatine's expression darkened, and his voice grew cold. "Then you have outlived your usefulness." Vader ignited his lightsaber, and Palpatine raised his hands, crackling with Force lightning. Tony activated his suit, realizing too late that he had been nothing more than a pawn. The air in the desolate landscape of Thanos' farm was thick with tension. The once quiet fields now held the bodies of stormtroopers and the remains of Tony Stark's nanotech droids, scattered like broken toys. Tony, his suit battered but still functional, stood before Palpatine and Darth Vader. The lifeless form of Thanos lay behind them, the battle finally over. Palpatine's yellow eyes gleamed with cold fury. "You've served your purpose, Stark, but the stones, you failed to deliver them." Tony's face twisted in disbelief. "Failed? I just helped you take out the most dangerous threat to the universe, and this is how you thank me?" Vader stepped forward, his red lightsaber ignited. "The Emperor does not tolerate failure." Tony raised his hands defensively, his nanotech armor beginning to shift and repair itself. "You think you can just kill me? After everything I've done for you?" Palpatine raised his hands, tendrils of Force lightning crackling at his fingertips. "You are a tool, Stark, nothing more. And tools that no longer serve their purpose are discarded." The battle erupted in an instant. Palpatine unleashed a storm of Force lightning, which Tony barely blocked with a hastily formed energy shield from his suit. The ground around him scorched and cracked under the intensity of the attack. "Big mistake," Tony growled, his HUD scanning both opponents for weaknesses. Vader lunged forward, his lightsaber slashing through the air. Tony used his repulsors to propel himself backward, narrowly avoiding the strike. His nanotech armor shifted into a bladed weapon, clashing with Vader's saber. Sparks flew as the two engaged in a brutal melee, the clang of metal echoing across the battlefield. Palpatine watched, his face twisted in amusement. Before joining the fray, with a flick of his wrist, he sent debris hurtling toward Tony, forcing the inventor to divide his attention. "You're fighting a losing battle, Stark," Vader intoned, his strikes becoming more relentless. "The Force will always triumph." Tony's mind raced as he struggled to keep up with their combined assault. "Yeah? Well, where's the Force when you need a decent Wi-Fi signal?" he quipped, his repulsors blasting at Vader's chest, forcing the Sith Lord to stumble. Tony's suit adapted rapidly, deploying new weapons and countermeasures. He launched mini-missiles at Palpatine, who deflected them with a wave of his hand, sending the explosions harmlessly into the air. Vader's strikes grew more precise, his enhanced suit giving him agility that matched Tony's. "You've improved his armor," Vader said, his voice cold, "but it will not save you." Tony's breathing grew labored as the fight dragged on. "You know, I've fought gods before. You guys, you're not even in the top 5. Vader struck with a devastating blow, his lightsaber slicing through one of Tony's gauntlets. Sparks erupted as Tony winced, his nanotech struggling to repair the damage. Palpatine laughed, his voice echoing. "You are no god, Stark, just a man clinging to a lost cause." As the battle reached its climax, Tony realized he couldn't win. He was outmatched, his suit failing against the sheer power of the dark side. But he wasn't about to let them walk away unscathed. Using the last of his suit's power, Tony activated a self-destruct mechanism in his chest reactor. He lunged at Vader, locking him in a powerful hold. "Get ready for the Big Bang, Vader," Tony shouted, his voice filled with defiance. Vader struggled, his enhanced strength no match for Tony's determination. Palpatine's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. "No!" he screamed, reaching out with the Force. The explosion rocked the battlefield, engulfing Tony and Vader in a blinding flash of light. When the smoke cleared, Tony lay lifeless, his armor shattered. Vader, severely damaged but alive, collapsed to his knees, his breathing erratic. Palpatine approached Tony's body, his face a mask of cold satisfaction. He looked down at the fallen genius, his voice dripping with contempt. "You were nothing but a pawn, Stark, a fool who dared to defy the Sith." Vader struggled to stand, his new armor flickering with sparks. "He was formidable," he rasped. Palpatine sneered, "A wasted potential." The Emperor turned his attention to the sky, where the Death Star and Star Destroyers loomed ominously. "The stones may be gone, but the Empire will find a way. We always do." The final scenes shift to Earth, where the surviving Avengers, now regrouping and mourning the loss of their friends, look up in horror as the Death Star and its accompanying fleet arrive in orbit. Shadows cast over the planet, signaling the beginning of a new galactic order. In the Emperor's throne room aboard the Death Star, Palpatine gazes at Earth with a sinister smile. "This world shall be the foundation of my ultimate empire." Vader, now standing silently at his master's side, his mechanical breathing echoing in the vast chamber. The glow of the Death Star's super laser casts an eerie light over them both. A final shot lingers on Tony Stark's destroyed armor, lying amidst the wreckage of the battlefield. His arc reactor flickers faintly, a reminder of the man who gave everything to save his world, even as his sacrifices were twisted by forces beyond his control.